Hello, everybody. Um, I would like to speak about the UN today. And you probably think that, again, that boring, ineffective organization, what that guy will tell to me. Something like he has a concern, or maybe he will express a concern, or just say that he is aware of something. But actually, I would like to begin with a story. Shaheen Kastawi was born in a refugee camp into Iranian family. Her life was not about dreams, careers, and future plans. It was about survival. She still remembers that her family had to trade shampoos and toothpaste in order to exchange it for few liters of diesel for heating, because winters in that desert were hard to survive. But after years of that life and years of uncertainty, her family was accepted for resettlement in New Zealand. She said that it was bigger than winning a lottery. And years later, she is working in a refugee camp there in New Zealand, helping new families that are just arrived. Her story is a great example of international cooperation. And that's the idea that I want to share today. The UN doesn't have a magic button that can solve all the world's problems in just one click. It doesn't work like a superhero. At its best, it's a platform that helps build chains of cooperation. And when those chains work, they can reach real people. For many, the UN feels distant. It feels like something that exists in New York, Geneva, or Vienna and doesn't impact our daily lives. We see emergency meetings, resolutions, vetoes, statements of concern, and if you ever turned the news in September, you would probably thought, what's the point of another meeting? And I understand that. But I think those questions are fair, but they're incomplete because they judge the UN only at the moment where everything else has gone wrong, when everything is at stake. Of course, the UN has failures. It failed to prevent the genocide in Rwanda in 1994, although the UN peacekeeping forces were already on the ground and were aware about upcoming attack. It failed to prevent massacre in Srebrenica in 1995. Today, the Security Council can still become paralyzed when major powers disagree. And they use veto. And veto blocks action when action is needed the most. The UN is not powerful in a way a sovereign nation is powerful. It doesn't have its own army. It cannot force a government to do the right thing. In fact, it heavily relies on member states, funding, and political will. But I think that's also a broader idea. Global problems cannot be solved by one country alone. Hunger, war, disease, displacement are bigger than national politics. And so the UN here turns dialogue and diplomacy into a solution. It obligates countries to explain themselves, to defend their positions, and most importantly, to listen even when they don't want to. That system is not a paradise. But as second UN Secretary General Dag Hammarskjöld once said, the UN was not created in order to bring us to heaven, but in order to save us from hell. And beyond those meeting halls, the UN system has done real work that is much more concrete than many people realize. Let me cover just 3 examples. Let's start by humanitarian protection. According to the UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, there are 123.2 million forcibly displaced and stateless people due to violence, conflict, and wars. That's 1 in 67 people on Earth, and that's 90 times the population of Estonia. Those numbers tell us that there are millions of people who need help every day just to survive. And the UN, as a huge system, doesn't help them all. It creates a chain of responsibility. Exactly as we saw with Shaheen's example. One country built a refugee camp to accept those who are coming from the front line. Another country opened a legal pathway for a refugee family to immigrate, to start a new life. And most importantly, local communities, doctors, teachers, and many other people and volunteers were there to help. Second topic that I want to raise is global health. UNICEF, which is UN Child Fund, deliver more than 2 billion vaccine doses every year, covering almost half of the world's children under 5. Just look at those numbers. Right now, there is a child who is receiving a vaccine dose in a small clinic, or maybe in a tent. There is no major news headline. There is no statement of concern. Maybe there is no even a comment on the internet. But for that child, life might change completely. That child might never get measles, might never be paralyzed by polio. That child can grow up, go to school, love, and raise a family. And behind that moment, there is a huge system and a chain of responsibility that works for that. My third example would be peace building. Sierra Leone suffered a brutal civil war that lasted from 1991 to 2002, taking up to 70,000 people alive. The UN peacekeeping mission there were among the first missions that were allowed to use force. Before, it was permitted only when soldiers are under attack. As a result, the mission were able to disarm 75,000 soldiers and destroy 42,000 pieces of weapon. It doesn't create a peace alone, but it helped create conditions in which Sierra Leoneans could begin rebuilding their country. And when the war ended, the work of the mission continued. The mission helped government to hold an election, to implement reforms, and to monitor human rights, so that peace would be something more than just absence of fighting. That's also a good example of international cooperation. It is not always a peace deal that is signed in front of cameras. It might be a family that doesn't remain forgotten. It might be a child that gets a second chance. It might be a disease that never spreads. And so the UN system here, providing a platform for countries, agencies, and communities to work together towards solutions. And that's the way I think we should understand it. We don't have to imagine that the UN is one powerful organization above the world, but it's a platform where everyone is included and where solutions are born. Nowadays, it's really easy to become cynical. It feels easy to say that the system is broken, that nothing is changing, and maybe we should even abolish the UN. But I think that cynicism also has a cost. If we will only look at failures, we wouldn't be able to see the impact on millions of people that is happening because we chose cooperation over indifference. I urge all of you to look at the UN not from distance of a headline, but much closer, from a clinic, from a classroom, from a family that gets a second chance, and from people like Shaheen, who reminded us that when global cooperation works, it does not remain global. It becomes deeply and personally human. Thank you.